So Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be once again joined by my old friend Gary Logan. Sadly, in more sad circumstances, we have to say this week, the boxing world has lost an incredible servant in Tony Burns, former head coach of Repton ABC, of course, and one of the sport's most dedicated and talented teachers. Gary, you know him a lot better than me. Tell us a little bit about the man that you knew so well.
Where do I start with Burnsy? I mean, he is of that ilk of, they were amazing. You know what? I go back to a time where you would have him, Mick Carney, and Mr. Akai over at All Stars, all sitting next to each other, making bouts, you know, or talking about fighters. And, you know, you hold on to those memories now. You don't need pictures. It's not like this era where we live in where everything has to be defined by a picture. These are wonderful memories that I had. The first time I met Tony was when I won the Class B London ABAs, and I ended up stopping a Repton boy, Charlie Smith, in the first round, and he'd been chasing me all over the ring. He's a really strong boy. And I remember stopping him. I got out of the ring, I'm really elated, and he looked at me and he went, "You'll need more than that to win a title, Logan. There's so much more. He goes, you'll need a lot more than that to win a title, Logan. And I know if you get it." And it was just sort of like, because Mick Carney was his friend, it gave him license to give me that opinion of give himself his opinion of me, rather. And it sort of pulled me up in my tracks. It really did. And you know, there as I'm thinking of London champion for the second year running, but Tony always reminded you that not to take your eyes off the ball. Even if you did do it, he was always reminding you of that. And he didn't know me at that time. I didn't know him. I was just thinking, like, who is this guy? And Mick sort of like raised his eyebrows. This is Tony Burns, Gary, you know. And but I soon got to know him because about 2.5 years later, less than that, I actually wanted to join the Repton. And I did join the Repton. He arranged for me. Mick Carney facilitated it, which is lovely of him to have done that, because I knew that he was a little bit disappointed that I was leaving the lodge. And I went down there, and I think Tony did everything to dishearten me or from joining the Repton, because the first thing he said to me was, "What are you doing here, Logan? I only have winners here, and you don't win." And I said to him, "Well, if I'm with you, I'm going to win." And he went, "Well, we'll see about that." And he goes, "Anyway, you go and get your kit changed. Did you bring your kit?" I went, "Yeah." He goes, "I've got a kid to spar with you." And it was Roy Rowland. And Roy Rowland had won multiple junior titles at that time. He was a budging scene. He was a young England international. He was going to be Repton's next big star. And he bashed me up. It was the first time I ended up seeing stars in sparring. But and I got out of the ring after 4 rounds. And Tony goes, "So I'll see you next week, yeah?" But the sort of look on his face was like, "Let's see what your character's like." And I goes, "Yeah, you will, Tom." And I came back the next week, and by the next week, Roy had suddenly turned pro with Jimmy Tibbs. And so it was on to the next generation of fighters. Me, Sam McNess, Billy Cousins, Marlon Ward, Marlon Jones, Lee Baker. Oh my God, there was Mark Tibbs. There was so much talent down at the gym at the time. And that was it. It was about us sort of taking the next generation of Repton fighter forward, you know?
How much of the reason for you moving from the lodge to the Repton in the first place was down to the presence of Tony Burns?
It was massive, because I'd already respected them a lot through George and Kevin Bowers and what they'd done with the juniors at that time, you know, bringing through the likes, as I said, of Steve McNess, Mark Tibbs, Marlon Jones, Marlon Ward, all those guys that had won multiple junior titles. So I was always enamored by them. I was impressed by them, but I had lots of warnings saying that Burns is going to drive you hard. He's a hard man to please, but what he doesn't know about boxing isn't worth knowing. And if you can get past his kind of flinty at the time exterior, you'll meet the guy on the inside is a lovely man. And he proved that to me countless times. We were, let's say, at the start of our trip together, we were at each other a lot because I didn't back down a lot. And he certainly wasn't because he was Tony Burns. And I think he liked the fact that I wouldn't back down. And I think he respected the fact that I was traveling all the way from Croydon 3 times a week to train at Bethnal Green, you know. And we went on many trips together. Sometimes just me and him. It was crazy. It would just turn out all me and him and one other fighter. And there's just so many put downs, but then there were so many little bits of respect shown, or nice little quips that what's the word I'm looking for? You know, like compliments. Yeah, there'd be so many nice little compliments, you know. And sometimes they'd be backhanded. Like we go to one show. I remember it was just before. Oh, it's the year he wouldn't. I said I wanted to go into the 1987 ABAs, and he said, "No, you're too young. You're too immature. You can't go in it." We argued a lot, and he wouldn't let me go in it because I was only like 18 at the time, 18 and a half. And he said, no, you need another year. So he goes, anyway, I'm going to take you to a show. You're going to box a kid. So we went to some show out in home counties, and at the weigh-in, the guy said, oh, can we make this a free freeze? Because my guy's going into the ABAs. And Tony looked at him, looked at me, and went, no, my kid's only a 3-2 fighter. So anyway, I got in there, and I chinned the kid in the first round. I put him over twice and stopped him in the first round. And I thought, we got back to the corner, and Tony looked at me and goes, why were you swinging in there like some stupid little amateur bellend? That's not the way we coach at Repton. Why were you swinging in there? I was punching all over the place. Your punches should be a lot more precise than that. And I said, Tony, I've stopped the guy in the first round. He goes, that doesn't matter. It's how you stop him. It's about being clinical. It's about being skillful. He goes, I hate hooligans, Logan. And I know you're not a hooligan. I hate hooligans. And what Tony termed as hooligans were kids who were very mature for their age at junior level that couldn't go through to senior level because they were so mature physically. They used to just get in and bash kids up. They didn't use any skill. And Tony was big on skill. And the fact, so he didn't like them when they went senior and they're still trying to be Rorios because he knew at some point they get found out. Whereas he believed in, if you believed in your boxing fundamentals and you could punch a bit as well, then the two are going to go hand in hand. You've got a better chance of going further. And that's what he always tried to implement into me. And so there's me thinking Charlie Big Potatoes having stopped this kid in the first round. And Tony soon brought me back down to earth, you know.
How did you develop both as a boxer and as a young man, I guess, during your time under Tony at Repton?
He was like, I had so much respect for him. I had so much grudging respect for him, even though he was really sarcastic to me 90% of the time. He was like a second dad where you always wanted to please them. And if they gave you any little bit of compliment, man, you'd hang on to him because it didn't come often. It did not come often. And, you know, you'd be down there sparring. You'd be sparring with like Billy Cousins. Now, Billy Cousins beat me 3 times in the amateurs 3 times out of 3. And we're good friends now. We speak a lot on Facebook. And he just had a southpaw style that I just couldn't get used to in the amateurs. I thought I won the second fight, but, you know, that was close enough. But the first 2 fights, one was in the NABC London final. The other one was at NABC London final. And when Billy joined the Repton and we were sparring, one time got out the ring and Tony went, Logan, how many times you spar with Cousins? I said, a few times now. He goes, how many times you fight him? I said, 3 times. Why are you answering me questions you know the answer? He goes, no, what I'm trying to say to you, Logan, is that when you're going to realise that you've got the ability to lead him onto your shots rather than you trying to be overly aggressive, why don't you be the counter puncher? And I tried it and it's really successful. And I got out of the ring and he looked at me and he just had this smirk on his face. And I went, don't say a word. Just don't say a word.
I bet you never fought him again, did you?
And I never fought Billy again. I was like, wow, I wish I had this job. But, you know, and it's just little things like that. And there was another great time where, I mean, as soon as you got out of the ring up, everyone was the same. You got out of the ring, you always looked at Tony for affirmation or a bit of a put down. And sometimes he would say neither. You might have had the best spar in the world and he would say neither. And so you were always striving. And also because of who he was, he built a winning mentality. That's the number one reason why I joined Repton. It was a winner's gym. And so many times before I'd been the bridesmaid and I wanted to be a bride. And when I wanted to be the bride. And when I first got there, as he said, he goes, "Why are you joining here? I only want winners here." And then he took me to the Ralphos Cup 3 months later. And I had two fights, 2 first-round stoppages, because I could punch a little bit in the amateurs. For 2 first-round stoppages, and it was like, yeah, shut you up, Burnsy, you know. But it was always done because his heart was in a good place, and I never realised that. Other coaches used to say that to me. Say, "Logan," they sent me Gary. He was the only one that called me Logan down there. Everybody else would call me Gary. And I remember Gary Cook, one of my coaches, saying, "Gary, if Tony's talking to you, it's because he's interested in you. If he's not talking to you," because there were so many kids down there that he couldn't talk to everybody. So if he was talking to you, he was kind of interested in you. And and that was the case, because when we were getting ready to go into the ABAs, when he finally let me go into the ABAs, me and Steve McNess, Sammy's dad, were in the same weight group, and everybody was like, "My God, what's going to happen if them two fight?" And I remember there was a fighter, I won't call his name because he really used to annoy me. And he was winding us up, and he was a senior figure in the gym. And he was like, "Oh, I wonder who's going to win out of McNess and Logan. It's got to be McNess, hasn't it? He's been young England and everything." And Tony was sort of like, "You know what? You never know what's going to happen, because, you know, Logan's not a bad fighter." And for Tony to compliment me in front of everybody, now that's what I'm saying about him. He could make you feel either this small, or you feel that you could take on the whole of England, you know? And that was what he was incredible at. He just had an incredible ability to just get the best out of his fighters if he thought they were worth caring about. And I will never ever forget that. When I went pro, I had 3 options. It's so funny. Can I swear on it? Yeah. You're going to delete it. So anyway, I gave him, he said to me, one of them was a very good friend of his, Terry Lawless. Terry Lawless was a very good friend of him, Terry Lawless and Mickey Duff. And the other 2 were the big promoters, the other big promoters of the day. So I won't say which one was which. But anyway, I said to him, I know you're trying to steer me towards Lawless and Duff, but I'm thinking about this other guy. And he went to me, "Well, you got a problem there, Logan." He's always smoking in the gym, very critically. And I goes, "Why is that, Tom?" And he went, "Oh, why is that, Tony?" He went, "He's a cunt." That's so hilarious. Honestly, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. And needless to say, I didn't go with one of them. I went with Mickey Duff. And, you know, Tony was always complimentary. Like every kid that went pro, he always welcomed us to come down to the gym and have a look around and still be amongst the other fighters if we wanted to have a little spar around or move around with them. And there's so many memories. Like when I won the London title, that was a big thing back in those days. Just to win the North East Divs, you'd have to fight 3 or 4 times in one day. And that was the same in the South East Divs. Not so much in the Northwest, had a little bit of a smaller... No, Northwest was quite busy. It was the Southwest that wasn't as busy. But to get out the Northwest, Northeast and Southeast Divs, you know, you had to be pretty good and pretty resilient. And I had 3 bouts that day, and luckily I got in the lucky half of the draw. Unfortunately, Steve McNess got in the other tough half of the draw. He had Rocky Bryan, former ABA runner-up, and he had Ori Jones in his group. They were all tough guys. And I had guys that kind of knew about me, kind of respected me, kind of feared me. One of them I've beaten twice already. And I stopped him in the first round, and I stopped the other kid in the first round. And before you know that, I'm in the final. And unfortunately for Steve, he boxed Rocky Bryan first fight. And so we're getting in the ring to fight Ori Jones. And Tony Burns goes, "You're a lot younger than him. He's been around a long while. I need you to stand on him and chase him all over this ring." And that was his boxing. That was his instruction with me. And I did it to the letter. I went out there and I just took the center of the ring and I chased him all over the ring. I was really aggressive because I was very fearful of him. He was a good fighter, a really good left hook like myself. And yeah, I won it on points and I was really, really happy. So then we go to the English semis and we're on the way. We're driving up. It's me and Marlon Ward. And we get there to Gloucester, and I'm reading the actual program of all the fighters, and a big section of it is on Gary Logan. And it's like, wow, Malcolm Meredith wrote it. I'll never forget it. And he goes, now the big question is, who can stop Gary Logan, who's knocked out 4 out of 5 opponents on his way here, which included Kevin Lucin, who would go on to win the British welterweight title. And that's when I beat Kevin. Yeah, so wasn't it? Yeah, so as that was at Royal Albert. So I'm reading this, and Tony goes, don't read into that, Logan. Just put it down. And I'm like, oh my God, this is about me. So anyway, I get in a ring, and I try and chin Mark McCreef, who would go on to win it, and he chins me first. And on the way back, Marlon Ward won that night, and he boxed really well. So it's a tale of two halves. We're in the car. Marlon Ward's sitting there, and he's, oh, Gary, I'm so gutted that you lost. Marlon Ward's a lovely guy, and a really, really good boxer. And Tony, we pulled into a petrol station, and Tony just looks around at me, and he went, I wish you hadn't fucking read that program, Logan. And it was just so lovely. It was so nice of him to say that, There's as I said, that's just like only a few of the stories, but this man, he produced champions before me. He continually produced champions after me, one being Darren Barker, who would go on and win a Commonwealth Gold medal. So many guys that would go on and represent the club at the Olympics or whatever. And he never stopped losing his zest to help guys become better, better at being boxers or just better at whatever trade. Tony knew some guys were never, ever going to be professionals, but he would help them in whatever way he could. If he could put in a reference for them with a job, he would do that. He was that much of a good guy. And characters like him and Mick Carney and Mickey May and Mr. Akai, they're leaving us. So we've got their memories to hang on to. And, when it comes to memories of Tony Burns, it's up there with Mickey Carney. For us, the guys that were fortunate enough to be around these guys, they are doyens. They are our role models,
You're a trainer now, of course, of some repute, reputation building all the time. What have you taken from what you learned from Tony Burns that you use in your role now?
Bullet points. When I first started coaching, I used to say too much and not enough goes in. And Tony would just have a blunt way of getting his instructions to make you do what was needed to win a fight. So say, like, there was one night we had a club fight. I could write a book just on me and Tony's experiences. And it was Repton versus Ireland. It was the year before I actually went in the ABAs. And I boxed this kid. And at the start of the round, Tony said, just box him, be smart, box him aggressively, just let your hands go, but, do what you do well. So I've gone out there on the edge. I haven't taken the centre ring because he's very aggressive. And I'm boxing him, catching him, but he's catching me. And then all of a sudden, right towards the end of the round, he puts me over, hits me with a shot, went over. Go back to the corner, and Tony goes, "You all right, Logan?" I went, "Yeah." He goes, "What the fuck were you doing in there?" I said, I was boxing like you told me." He goes, "Yeah, but you give him a bit too much momentum. And now you're in a fight. You fucked it. You've lost the first round. You're going to have to go out there and bash him up now." So that was it. I went out there the next round and I gave this kid a standing count. And the third round we went at it again and I won it on a majority. And that was what Tony could do so well. It was like sometimes when you've done all the drilling in the gym, you don't have to talk too much about tactics. You just need to talk about what your fight is. Tony was very big on feel, and he would always remind you of what you've done in the gym, and he would just say, "Bring that back into this fight." So you remember, and he had an amazing brain. So he'd say, "Remember that spar you had with Mark Tibbs where you were throwing this shot? Right, I want you to throw that shot." And that was it. You go out there and you throw it, and before you knew it, you're being successful. And so with Tony, it is about less is more. He had a keen eye, as I said to you, with the whole thing with Billy Cousins, with that whole episode of me sparring with Billy. He had a keen eye to see to remind you of what you could actually do well. Because sometimes when you have a coach or when you're a fighter, you get caught up in your own self and you don't listen as much as you should do. And you kind of think you know it all, and you get frustrated because things you're trying aren't working. And Tony had a way of just, I mean, obviously you can see I was really frustrated with that spar with Billy Cousins. And he said to me, you know, be more of a counterpuncher. Or if I was sparring with someone who was quite quick, like Mark Tibbs, he said, like, just be smart, use him for speed rather than trying to hit at him. You know, it was just all sorts of little nuances, you know. But the main thing I remember about him is that obviously he got winners together. He made sure other fighters saw that winners won, and it made you want to be a winner. And it just gave you confidence in that.
Great stuff. Well, Gary, really appreciate it. We'll all miss him, of course, but it's always good to keep his memory alive by talking to people like you, knew him pretty well. And best of luck, obviously, with everything going on at the moment and with your stable. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Nice talking to you.
And you, mate. Take care. Speak soon.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.